Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region MPO Planning Organization. I'm David Moeller. I represent Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt here. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMATION. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Betsy Harvey Hertzfeld of the MPO staff at herzfeld@ctps.org or 857-702-3701. or via the chat box. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Please call the roll.
Certainly. David, or Mascot, seat 1.
This is David Moeller, representing Secretary Monica Tibbetts-Nutt. I'm here.
Thank you. Mascot, seat 2.
Good morning, John Bichard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Good morning, John. Mascot, Highway Division. The MBTA.
Good morning, Cindy Johnson here representing General Manager Phil Ang in the MBTA.
Good morning, Sandy. Regional Transportation Authorities, Metro West Transit Authority.
Good morning, this is Tyler Tarasi representing Administrator Jim Nee for the MWRTA present.
Good morning, Tyler. Massport. Next, do we have the MBTA Advisory Board?
Good morning, Hannah Swolikowski, MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, welcome. Next, Advisory Council.
Leonard Dickens Advisory Council here.
Hello, Leonard. City of Boston, seat 1.
Jennifer representing Mayor Michelle Wu in the City of Boston.
Good morning. City of Boston, seat 2.
Nayeli Rodriguez, also representing Mayor Wu and the City of Boston.
Hello, hello. At-large city, City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor DiMaria and the City of Everett.
Good morning. At-large city, City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
Good morning. At-large town of Arlington. Next is at-large town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green for the town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin. Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne in the Inner Core Committee.
Good morning, Tom. And via chat, I am also recording John Romano's presence. Thank you. Next, Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Hi, good morning. Kristen Guichard, representing Select Board Member Chair Fran Arsenal, for the Magic Subregion.
Thank you and welcome. Briefly saw Laura Gilmore's hand go up. Not sure if
No, that was
you
an
were
error. I
changing.
apologize.
Not a problem. Thank you for clarifying. Next is Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giametti, representing Metro West, and Mayor Chapsky Framingham.
Thank you, Dennis. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Nguyen here representing the North Shore Task Force and Mayor Michael Cahill.
Hello, Darlene. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington. Next, we will go to South Shore Coalition, Town of Hall.
Hi, Chris Diorio representing Hull Select Board Chair Erwin Nessa.
Hello, Chris. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
Hi, Rachel Betson here representing Rentham and the Swamp region.
Hello and welcome. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trick sub-region.
Good morning. Thank you. Next, I'll call on Federal Highway Administration. Then to the Federal Transit Administration. And going back up the road, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say Anthony Jones from Federal Highways.
Thank you. Welcome. I will just go through. Is there anyone else on the roll call that I've not yet recognized?
Yeah, Eric Barassa, MAPC.
Eric, welcome and thank you. Anyone else?
Dara Lee from Massport is here.
Great. Thank you, Sarah, noting that as well. Finally, anyone else I have not called? With that calls the roll back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Next item on the agenda is Chair's Report. I have none at this time, so we'll go directly to the Executive Director's Report. Tegan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I just want to acknowledge that we have another meeting, sort of several in a row, where we will be meeting for longer than the kind of usual goal of the 2-hour meetings. So I very much thank you for your presence. We have a lot of important business to cover today. And so next slide. For my report today to you all, I would like to make a few announcements that set some of the context for today, and then we'll briefly review today's agenda and then highlight the next meeting. Next slide, please. So in terms of announcements, I want to say something since we are on the eve of releasing the draft federal fiscal year 26 to 30 TIP document out for public review. And then I also want to give some context for the Vision Zero project update that will also be coming later in the agenda. Next slide. So first, related to the release of the draft 26 to 30 TIP that we are asking you today to consider for voting up for public comment. The discussion over these last few board meetings and committee meetings have really largely and appropriately been focused on the very challenging aspects of advancing this TIP. And while there are those issues that we will continue to debate, I would like to set the stage for voting out the document for public comment today by acknowledging some of the advancements that we have made in supporting this process together. First of all, I wanted to mention that, we've talked a little bit about the role of the TIP committee, but in essence, or kind of overall, we've really worked hard to leverage the TIP process engagement and readiness committee, or the TIPper committee, over this past year to really offer that more in-depth forum that you all have, board members have expressed their interest in, to discuss and debate among the committee members and with project proponents the kind of challenges you're also discussing at the board meeting. So I wanted to acknowledge that that group has met about 5 times since October, which really represents significant hours committed by your colleagues on the board who are part of the committee, as well as from staff who, put in the work and effort to prepare materials for the meetings, facilitate the meetings, and then also follow up on those meetings. Just wanted to thank you all for your effort in that space and acknowledge how much work has been done. I also wanted to acknowledge I think the strides we've been making together to coordinate with MassDOT to enable staff to the MPO to be able to provide more frequent readiness updates and also work with you all to resolve more of the challenges faced by project proponents. This has been happening through the newly established quarterly readiness updates that are called for in our MOU, but also in other forums like the TIP readiness engagement process readiness and engagement committee, and also sort of one-on-one and other forums. And so that's been a lot of effort, and I really commend staff and MassDOT and others for working to spend that time and work more together to collaborate on solutions. And then I also wanted to say, for context for this tip, that we saw an increase in tip applications for new projects to include in the tip. And while we have limited funds with which to accommodate those, this is a challenge that we've been talking about for several years, that we want to make sure that people feel like there's an entree into the tip and that we are seeing new applications. And so that is also part of the process to celebrate this year. And again, acknowledge that folks put a lot of effort into those applications, and staff have taken a lot of time to score and assess those applications. And so it's very worthwhile work. So again, I just want to commend all the work leading to this draft. I want to continue to acknowledge that there's much more work to do together as staff, board members, committees, project proponents, and that's going to extend beyond today into the public comment period. That will run through the next few board meetings if you vote to do so. We will be providing an intermediate update to the board on May 15th, and we will have a TIP committee meeting following that in the afternoon on May 15th. So we'll continue the conversations and debates there. And then, of course, as we approach making a final decision on any adjustments to the draft TIP in early June. And then we will continue to have both TIP committee meetings and board discussions about how to continue to improve the process after that. Next slide, please. Sorry, that's the next steps. Next slide, please. So in terms of the Vision Zero work that staff has been engaging in through a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, and that this board has been committed to supporting and advancing, I wanted to provide you a little bit of context for today's kind of upcoming presentation that's going to set the stage for the next few months. So you're going to be hearing from us a bit more over the next few months compared to the last several months, as we've done some of the groundwork. But what we are seeing, what we are experiencing right now is that while the discretionary grant, the Safe Streets and Roads for All 2023 awarded discretionary grant was underway before the change in administration, we've not yet received approval for a requested extension beyond the original end date of that contract for that grant past June 30th, 2025. So what we have done is shifted to implementing a two-phased approach to creating this regional safety action plan, with the first phase being focused on completing a plan that's going to meet the federal requirements by the end of June. And then if we do receive the extension in the meantime, the second phase will still build on that foundation to provide the really robust and innovative plan that fully meets the intent of our original proposal and vision for this work. So to adjust to the abbreviated timeline from what we were anticipating, we will be coming to the board after today, again in May and in June, with the goal of getting to an approved plan by June 30th. And again, I wanted to set the stage for that because I know you haven't heard from us in a few months about this. In addition to that pending extension, we are still continuing to wait to see what happens with the second Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that was awarded to the MPO in 2024, but is not yet obligated. But despite these challenges or sort of uncertainties in the grants, I do want to acknowledge that the safety work, the regional action plan, is a core value and is of importance to the MPO. And you have made a commitment to eliminating roadway fatalities and serious injuries. And so what that means is that whether or not the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding continues beyond June 30th, we as staff remain committed to working with you as our board to continue to advance safety in the region and the implementation of these plans through the funding that is available, even if it's going to be at a different pace than the grant program funds would have allowed. Next slide, please. So for today's agenda, I'll just kind of highlight some of the key action items and presentations coming up. First, we will have two scopes of work related to work for the MBTA. The first is about understanding how demographic changes in the MBTA region have affected transit ridership over the last 20 to 30 years. And that's being funded through a pool of transit-focused 5303 funds that MassDOT works with stakeholders to determine how to allocate. And then the second is a continuation of MBTA-funded work that staff have done for many years to support their annual submission to the National Transit Database. We will also have an action item related to the current TIP, Federal Fiscal Year 25 to 29 TIP Amendment 11, which previews some of the changes proposed for MBTA projects in the TIP, as well as some readiness changes to bridge projects in the statewide highway program. Ethan LaPointe will talk about that a bit later. And then we'll have two presentations from two of our core partner agencies about their prioritization for projects to be included in the TIP. We will hear from MassDOT on their capital investment plan development process, which informs the investments that MassDOT incorporates into the highway program portion of the TIP. And then also we're here again from the MBTA, following on the presentation from the last meeting about the MBTA CIP, Capital Investment Plan. They'll also present some of the TIP project highlights and answer further questions you might have projects on the TIP. Then, of course, we will have the highlight of asking you to review and release the 26 to 30 TIP document for public review. And then finally, we will have the aforementioned Vision Zero update, where we'll talk about the safety data analysis and stakeholder engagement that's been done over the last several months and set the stage for the next few months of work, which I gave you a little context for. Next slide, please. So the next meeting is planned to be on May 1st. It will be virtual again. One of the highlights I'd like to flag here is that tentatively we are planning to talk to you all more about the next stage of the NPO's advisory council. So I look forward to that conversation with you all, among other items. And that, Mr. Chair, is it. I can happily answer questions if there are any.
Thank you. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing none, next item on our agenda is public comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment at this time? Ben Cares.
Good morning, everybody. Ben Cares, I'm the Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Chelsea. I believe that board members had received a comment letter regarding our TIP proposal project 611983. Just wanted to start off by saying that we really appreciate all of the work that the MPO staff has put into vetting these submissions, and we know that you have a very difficult job in liaising between communities and Mass DOT. We detected that the Park and Pearl project had been supplanted from FY 2030 TIP programming year. I'm joined today by the city manager, Fidel Maltez, who can speak to the community need, but I wanted to provide some quick updates about the mechanics of the project that may help to align the interests of the board and ensure that you know that we're moving forward with design and that we're on schedule. We actually submitted our 25% submission today to Mass DOT. It also appears that the cost estimate is coming in a little bit lower than what had been initially proposed. For both of those reasons, and because this project had received a relatively high score and appears to be our priority for the region and not just for the city of Chelsea, we'd love for you to consider it in the FY 2030 TIP process. Additionally, just for context on why it was pushed back, is because we actually have a housing development happening just adjacent to this project site. And we're hoping to leverage that housing development, it's affordable housing and mixed use, to bring in some infrastructure funds for utility work, which is below the surface project, which really should happen before we do the surface enhancement through TIP funding. So I'd like to pass it over to City Manager Maltez to give a little bit more support for this. And we're here to answer questions, and we really appreciate all the work that's gone into this to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maltez, just introduce yourself for the record, okay?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Moeller. I am Fidel Maltez, and I'm the city manager in Chelsea. Thank you to the MPO for all the work you do in our region, and specifically to all the support that you are giving Chelsea as we make significant infrastructure improvements in our community. I am joining today to urge the Boston MPO to maintain the Park and Pearl project in the TIP in the scheduled year of FY 2030. This project is of critical importance to our community, and we respectfully request that it not be functionally removed from the Boston MPO program. Chelsea is an entirely environmental justice community, and we bear more than our fair share of regional traffic and congestion moving in and out of Boston. Pearl Street connects the McCardle Bridge and East Boston and carries significant traffic through the region, particularly with closures on tunnels or work on the Tobin Bridge. This exacerbates the significant traffic related issues in this intersection, including a cluster of vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrian conflicts that makes the intersection unsafe and inhospitable to multimodal users. The safety concerns of the project area are are compounded by heavy congestion, and this intersection is a barrier to safe and efficient transportation for our residents, many of whom rely on walking, biking, and public transit to access key services and employment. The Park and Pearl intersection is in dire need of modernization. It is critical to reducing congestion, improving safety, and increasing accessibility for all users, particularly vulnerable populations in our communities. With major redevelopment projects, as Ben shared, that is really focused on affordable housing in this intersection and in our downtown, this project becomes even more vital to ensure that infrastructure can support future growth and improve quality of life for our residents. The project was given a high score of 70 out of 100, and we strongly believe that this continued support will provide long-term benefits to the city of Chelsea and to the greater Boston region. Moreover, as Ben explained, we are on track for Mass DOT submissions. We are on track to replace infrastructure from a water and sewer standpoint in line with the expected project timeline of FY 2030. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Maltese. Bill Degnan?
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill Degnan, City of Cambridge Transportation. I'm here this morning to thank the MPO members and staff for all of the time they've put into the development of this TIP, attending the last several meetings. I've seen the incredible effort it takes to put this together, so we really appreciate all the work on this. I'm also here to say from the City of Cambridge that we appreciate and support the inclusion of 2 Cambridge projects, money for a Blue Bikes project, as well as for the design of the Fitchburg Crossing Bridge. Those are both incredibly important projects to the city, keep transportation in our city safe and moving, so we appreciate the MPO including those. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments at this time? Oh, Brad Russell.
Good morning, Chair. Thanks for the recognition. Thanks to all the hard work from staff, board members, and agency partners to get us through the last 6 months of work on our signature efforts for the 5-year capital plan. I think coming out of our April 3rd meeting, Chair, several of us were reflecting and thinking hard about all the things that we have learned over several years of process improvements. And I really appreciated the framing of the ED report this morning. I think we can choose to do one of 2 things, Chair. We can choose the pessimistic route, the glass half empty, which some of our dialogue 2 weeks ago really kind of used. I choose rather to take a position of optimism and glass half full. This MPO, our members, our agency partners, our sub-regional representatives have really improved information sharing this TIP cycle. We have committed ourselves to a TIP committee. We have really improved the information sharing from Mass DOT, but also from MBTA and RTAs. I loved Tyler's presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like we are all learning throughout these processes. And so although there are hard decisions ahead, and we've got a lot of work in the year ahead, I really do want to ask folks to look back at our operations plan, which we adopted a couple of years ago, to think about this era of austerity and uncertainty at the federal level, and trying to continue to improve information sharing and understanding of risk control for the Mass DOT processes for right-of-way, utility coordination, project review. I think we identified some really important questions about 25% design submittals versus approvals last time, and I look forward to continuing all those conversations with you. Lastly, Chair, I just think it's important to give a tip of the cap to 2 specific individuals on this call, Jen Rowe, who has courageously and skillfully led our TIP committee, and Ethan Lapointe, who has courageously and skillfully managed information flow from dozens and dozens and dozens of sources to try to achieve our process requirements of transparency and inclusion. So thanks, everybody. Let's stay at it together.
Thank you, Brad. Any other comments at this time? Seeing none, Next item is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Seeing and hearing, oh, Jinro, sorry, Jin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, thanks, Tegan and Brad for those kind words, and I would like to thank everyone who served on the committee over the past year, and stakeholders who've been following along and participating, including other board members who've often attend meetings as well. Our next meeting, as Tegan previewed, will be following the MPO meeting at 1 p.m. on May 15th. We expect to review and discuss any changes that are likely between the draft tip that we're voting out today and the final. We'll also continue the conversation we've been having around expectations for projects programmed in the regional tip target program, and that includes expectations for information sharing with the MPO board that would keep a project in good standing and maintain its priority over unprogrammed projects, and then also milestones a project must reach to enter the tip, and also stay in its initially programmed federal fiscal year. Finally, I'd like to again extend the invitation for any board member who'd like to connect before we have that conversation on the 15th. Happy to schedule some time. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen? Seeing none, Chris Klim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. This is Chris Clem from MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning. I want to remind folks that the UPWP committee will be meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. in a virtual format, where we will review staff's final discrete study scenarios for the FFY 2026 UPWP, and putting those studies to a vote to see which one we will be moving forward with as they continue draft development of the FY 26 UPWP. Again, that meeting is this afternoon at 2 p.m. Look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 6, 2025. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes? And please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve the March 6 meeting minutes.
Sandy Johnston.
I will second that motion. We did want to request a couple of very quick minor edits to the minutes. One is just correcting Angela Cervello Jones's for name. The first time it's spelled with 2 L's, there's only 1 L, and the second is that it should be Cervello-Jones instead of Cervello all the way throughout. Very minor edits.
Thanks, Sandy. Any other comments, questions, changes, or suggestions? Seeing none, with those changes as noted, please call the roll.
Of course. David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
All right.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
John Romano. Thank you. Sandy Johnson,
Sandy Johnson, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannes Witlikowski,
Hannes Wilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
General, yes.
Mayeli Rodriguez,
Mayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Chute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti, Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Christy Ario, give me one moment. For the vote, is Christy Ario present? I will return. Rachel Benson,
Yes.
thank you. Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
anyone I have not called? Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a work scope about understanding the MBTA demographics and ridership changes. Joe DeLordo, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe DeLordo, and I'm a data analyst in the MPO's Project Analysis and Applications Group. Today, I will be presenting the scope of work for a 5303 Transit Planning Fund study called Understanding Demographic and Ridership Changes in the MBTA Region. The client for this work will be the MBTA. This project has a budget of $140,000 and is funded with 5303 Transit Planning Funds. The work is scheduled to be complete within 12 months of notice to proceed. This study is supported in full with non-MPO funding. Committing MPO staff to this project will not impinge on the quality or timeliness of MPO work. This study seeks to provide the MBTA with a data-centered framework for analyzing demographic changes across its service area and ridership. Supported by demographic, land use, and ridership data from across the MBTA system, this framework would help guide the MBTA's long-term thinking about service priorities. The objectives of this project are to understand existing methodologies for transit demographic analysis, conduct a qualitative and quantitative analysis of demographic and ridership data from the MBTA region, and synthesize this data to provide a potential evaluation framework for developing long-term service priorities. In Task 1, staff will review available research and conduct targeted outreach to the MBTA's peer transit agencies to understand existing methods for this kind of analysis. In Task 2, staff will conduct an exploratory analysis to understand what analyses could be performed and identify any gaps in data availability. Task 3 will involve qualitative research, engaging with internal and external stakeholders, and soliciting diverse perspectives to inform the analysis and final report. In Task 4, we will quantify demographic and ridership changes in the MBTA service area over the past 20 to 30 years using a variety of data. We will also use analytical tools to understand how land use and demographic characteristics can inform service planning decisions. This research and analysis will then be synthesized into a framework to guide MBTA staff in how to consider prioritizing service in light of demographic changes, and that work will be completed in Task 5. The final product of this work will be a report for MBTA staff. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions? Lynn Diggins.
Just a comment, a really good study. I'm glad to see the MBTA doing it. And when the time is right, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve this work plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. Are there any questions? Seeing none, Lynn, go ahead and make your motion.
Yes, I'll make that motion, and also I'll let Mr. Johnson know that I'll be asking him to come before the Rider Oversight Committee about this time next year to let us know about the study. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Is there a second? Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll second the motion.
Motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnston, yes. And Len, I will be happy to come before the Oversight Committee and anywhere else that wants to talk about it. And thank you to staff for their hard work on the scope.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannes Witlikowski,
Hannah Swilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
thank you. Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti, Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene, excuse me, Darlene Wynn, yes.
Chris Diorio, if you'd like to voice the vote, it's okay if you want to use the chat function or raise hand. I'm not sure if there's any technical difficulties. Just let me know through the roll call. Thank you. Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Chris Diorio. Okay, with that motion also carries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a work scope for the state fiscal year 2026 National Transit Database Data Collection and Analysis. Bradley Putnam.
I'm here to present a work program for MBTA State Fiscal Year 2026 National Transit Database. MPO staff have been assisting the MBTA with the annual submissions to the National Transit Database for many years, and this scope represents a continuation of that work. The budget is $248,000, and the MBTA will pay for this work. Schedule is 18 months from July 2025 to December 2026. The purpose of this project is to collect and analyze data for the MBTA about transit ridership in order to help them make their required annual submissions to the National Transit Database. This project has many components, including passenger surveys on heavy rail and light rail to determine average passenger trip lengths and trip lengths, observations at fare gates and on Green Line vehicles to estimate how many passengers use or do not use fare boxes and fare gates when they board rail vehicles, bus passenger counts to verify the MBTA's data from their automatic passenger counters, and shuttle bus passenger counts for times when the shuttle buses are substituting for rail service. Be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bradley. Any questions for Bradley? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to approve as presented, and please state your name for the record. Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, I'll motion to approve this work scope and also have a note of appreciation for CTPS and MBTA staff who do this important and often behind the scenes work. Particularly wanted to shout out Pam Stravis, who's helped us incorporate a lot of this ridership data and metrics that we're using to track progress towards some of our Go Boston 2030 goals. So wanted to take that opportunity.
Thanks, Jen. Eric?
And echo all Jen's sentiments and second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnson,
Sandy Johnson, yes, and thank you.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassi, yes.
Kenneth Whitlakowski,
Kenneth Wulikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti, Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Chris Diorio, Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the amendment number 11 to the tip. Ethan Lapointe.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm Ethan Lapointe. I'm the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. My first presentation here this morning is a request for tip amendment 11 for the current federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip to be released for a public comment period. Now, there's quite a few projects included in amendment 11 on the next slide, including changes across the federal fiscal year 2025 statewide highway program and the 2025 transit programs. Now, the changes within the statewide highway program reflect changes that either delay projects or remove projects from the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip as a result of the tip readiness days exercise that was conducted as part of the 2026 to 30 tip development. On the transit side, on the next slide, The transit program changes include 4 new community transit grant awards, which is a community transit grant operated and offered through the Massachusetts Department of Transportation using Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 funding. It also includes the removal of 1 project for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority, though worth noting up front that this was a project that was for an anticipated federal discretionary grant award that was not received, so it is not a formula-funded capital project. And it also, this is the bulk of the amendment, contains changes across the MBTA's capital program to reflect the changes being made as part of the MBTA's capital investment plan, or CIP update, which you'll hear about after my presentation today. It's worth noting in some cases as well here, there are 2 sets of parallel changes in both the statewide highway and the transit program for flexing carbon reduction funding, which is a federal highway source, between MassDOT to the MBTA. So when I say it's a parallel change, what I'm saying is these are changes that are mirrored in both the statewide highway and transit program, and therefore appear twice in this amendment. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide, I'll start off with the statewide highway program changes. And on to the next slide, please. These first 2 projects are both bridge projects, one in the town of Lincoln, which is the superstructure replacement of Concord Road, Route 126, over the MBTA and CSX Railroad. This project is proposed for removal, or I apologize here. Wrong project. This project description is being changed to specify that rather than being a complete bridge replacement, the project is only including a superstructure replacement on this contract. And the project is seeing a cost increase based on the latest estimates of unit costs of about $2.9 million. Now, it's worth noting for this next project, this being the bridge replacement of River Street over the MBTA and Amtrak in the city of Boston, this project has also seen a cost increase from $12.5 million to $15.7 million, but it is being removed from the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 tip. So in this current tip, its dollar value figure will be $0, but just for purposes of awareness, when it is reprogrammed in federal fiscal year 2027 of the draft 2026 to 30 tip, it will do so with that higher $15.7 million figure that reflects this cost increase. On the next slide, this format of the tables is continued with other projects. Each of these projects, again, are being removed from the federal fiscal year 2025 tip and either being reprogrammed in the next tip or are not currently programmed in that tip, but many of them have witnessed a cost increase as they've advanced through design. The Milton intersection improvements at Route 28, Randolph Avenue and Chickatobit Road, is seeing another delay out of federal fiscal year 2025 into 2026, and as part of the next tip, with a cost increase in the next tip to $11.6 million from its current $9 million cost figure. The bridge replacement in Somerville for Webster Avenue over the MBTA and Boston Main Railroad is also seeing a cost increase from $12.96 million to $17.23 million and will be programmed in fiscal 26 of the next tip. And on the next slide, we have 3 more projects. These are 3 projects that are not currently programmed in the federal fiscal year 2026 to 30 draft tip, but are proposed for being delayed out of federal fiscal year 2025. Thus, they're functionally being proposed at this time for removal unless the draft scenario changes. These are the Stoneham-Winchester deck replacement for the Marble Street Bridge over Interstate 93. This is also the deck replacement for State Route 2 Concord Turnpike over Pleasant Street in Lexington, and a Boston cleaning and painting project over the MBTA line, Columbia Road, Red Line, and Relief in that project area. Again, these are 3 projects that are not going to advertise within federal fiscal year 2025, but are not currently programmed in the next tip. Lastly, for the statewide highway program, the next slide, we have those carbon reduction projects that I mentioned earlier. This being a flex to the MBTA for the Quincy Bus Maintenance Facility modernization through carbon reduction program funding to the tune of about $5.9 million, and also $3.6 million for the procurement of 40-foot battery electric buses, also through the carbon reduction program. The next slide will take us into the transit program for this amendment. And the one after this, starting off with community transit grant awards in the Boston region. There are 4 here. The first being for the Cape Ann Transportation Authority for transportation to dialysis services. This is an award of $130,563 with a 50-50 match. So the budget for this line item is $261,126. The second award is for Greater Lynn Senior Services for Move Safe and Mobility Links. This is a $78,639 award with match, taking it to a line item value of $98,299. Mystic Valley Elder Services for Mobility Management is the third award, $62,203 an award, line item budget of $77,754, and the Brookline Council on Aging being the fourth and final award for Senior Transportation Services, a $50,000 award with $50,000 of match. And on the next slide, we just have the one project for the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. This was for a discretionary or a potential discretionary award that was not realized by the MWRTA for a SMART, which is a Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation USDOT grant for EV solar infrastructure projects. The programmed budget for this was $2.5 million, but it's being zeroed out as it was not awarded. Federal Transit Administration guidance for regional transit authorities advise that as part of capital planning efforts by RTAs, that any grants that an RTA may think that they would be looking to apply to, program those projects in advance of their application. So just mentioning that this is not necessarily a project that is actually being removed. It's more of a grant that was not awarded that was added in anticipation of that. And on the next slide, this then takes us into the bulk of this amendment, which are changes across the MBTA's capital programs to reflect their draft capital investment plan for both federal fiscal year 2025 and the next CIP for 2026 to 2030. I'll note up front what I'm talking about here on these following slides are program level changes. Specific projects that are funded by these programs are not only available on the MPO calendar and will not only be deliberated upon further in the presentation following this, but also appear in the draft tip document that will be discussed later in this meeting as well, specifically table 3-9 in chapter 3 of the document. So if you'd like more information, you can also reference those materials there. So starting off with MBTA section 5307 funding, the net change across the 4 different programs for the MBTA is at about $64.5 million. Starting with the Bridge and Tunnel program with a decrease from 91.5 to $29.25 million, a $62.25 million decrease. The Revenue Vehicle program decreasing from $796.66 million to $492.35 million, a $304.3 million decrease. The Signals and Systems program, a budget increase from $194.9 million to $414.2 million, a $219.25 million increase, and Stations and Facilities going up from $138.57 million to $350.43 million, a $211.86 million increase. Again, the net change for Section 5307 usage is an increase of $64.56 million across this $1.29 billion portfolio. The next slide then takes us into MBTA Section 5337 funding. The same rule applies here where specific projects funded through this program are reflected in Table 3-9. Now, whereas in Section 5307 there was a decrease for Bridge and Tunnel and Revenue Vehicles, there are increases here for these 2 sections of the program, increasing from $385.02 million for Bridge and Tunnel to $411.05, and for Revenue Vehicles increasing from $326.76 to $557.79 million, a $231.03 million increase. There's also another increase in the budget for the Signals and Systems program from $213 million to $322.74 million, a $109.74 million increase, and a decrease for the Stations and Facilities program for 5337 that was increased in Section 5307 from $597.76 to $268.04. That's a $329.7 million decrease. Net overall here is a change from the program size from $1.522 billion to $1.559 billion, a $37.1 million increase across this program. It is worth noting there is another FTA section program not included in this amendment for FTA section 5339 bus funding. There is no change in this amendment in funding levels for section 5339. I'm just mentioning that verbally in case anybody was looking for that, as it did appear in Amendment 4, but no changes in that program here today. On the next slide, we can move now into the other federal category for MBTA funding. Other federal funding includes a variety of sources that the MBTA may have, either through discretionary grant awards, FTA flex funding like the carbon reduction funding, or funding that the MPO provides to the MBTA for specific projects through the Transit Transformation Program. The first project here is the MBTA Quincy Squantum Pier Modernization Project. This is an existing project and is flagged for a cost increase when in reality, the local match proportion on this project is being adjusted from $1.06 million to $1.19 million. So the match proportion is increasing by a little over $135,000 here. For the Lynn Broad Street Corridor Transit Signal Priority Project, this is one from the federal fiscal year 2024 Community Connections Program. This project is funded by both Community Connections Program funding and a $220,000 federal earmark. As part of this amendment, this project will actually now just reflect only the earmark. The funding from the MPO for Community Connections funding will still continue to be utilized for this project, but the line item is just being adjusted to reflect solely the federal earmark for federal fiscal year 25. We also have two new discretionary awards, one through the Reconnecting Communities pilot for the JFK UMass Station Improvement Project for $2.5 million, and that carbon reduction program flex for the Quincy bus facility and the procurement of 40-foot battery electric buses to the tune of $9.5 million. This is that other parallel change on the carbon program I mentioned earlier. And on the next slide, we then have 4 projects that, as part of Amendment 10 to the federal fiscal years 25-29 TIP, were flexed over to the MBTA for utilization of regional target program funding through the Transit Transformation Program. This is the Bus Priority and Accessibility Project for the MBTA for $1 million, the Catamaran Overhaul for $2.63 million, the Natick Center Station Accessibility Project for $2.5 million, and the MBTA Wellesley Square Station Upgrades Project for $5 million. Again, when Amendment 10 took place, that was adding these projects within the Regional Target Program for federal fiscal year 25. Amendment 11 is now mirroring that change into the Transit Program for fiscal 25. So these are the same projects, just reflected on both sides of the TIP. And last but not least, we have a few discretionary grant award projects on the next slide that are not going to be obligated within federal fiscal year 2025 and may be obligated at a later date. This is the Everett Sweetser Circle project, the Lynn Riverworks Reimagined project. Both of those two projects are Reconnected Communities pilot awards. The North Station Draw 1 bridge replacement project, a National Infrastructure Project Assistance Program Mega Grant Award, the MBTA battery electric bus purchase from the FTA Low No Emission Grant Program, the Alewife Station and Garage Technical Assistance Grant Award through the Innovative Finance and Asset Concession Grant Program, and the Green Line CIG Core Capacity Grant Program, which is about $1.88 billion of expected funding through that grant. Again, these will not be obligated by the end of fiscal 2025, though many of these do appear in the 2026 to 30 CIP and are also reflected in the draft TIP. So with that, on the next slide, and the one following that, I will note that staff are requesting that the board votes to release Amendment 11 for a 21-day public comment period, though upfront staff are aware that there may be an additional request by the MBTA for ferryboat capital program funding for about $1.1 million of flex. Regardless, the comment period for Amendment 11 will begin Monday, April 21st and end May 12th at 5 p.m. And I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions for Ethan? Eric Barassa.
Yeah, thank you, Ethan. That's a lot of information. Appreciate your presentation. And maybe this is a question for the highway division. The bridge projects that were coming off that Ethan reflected, are we going to hear about those at a later time? I'm just curious. Are those aren't ready for this year, but I assume they're being worked on, and we'll hear about them at a later date.
John Bouchard.
Yes, Eric, we are flagging those, taking them off for this year because they're not going to make it for various reasons or changes in permitting right-of-way strategies, and we will be bringing them back in the future.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sandy Johnston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be happy to provide more detail on the request that Ethan mentioned to make an amendment to the amendment, so to speak. I can do that now or at a time of your convenience.
Well, why don't you talk about it now, and then we'll wrap it all up into a single motion.
All right, excellent.
Yep.
And please correct me, anybody from MPO staff or MassDOT, if I am getting any of this information wrong, because I only learned about this morning. But we at MBTA were alerted by OTP recently that there's approximately $1.1 million in FFY 2022 ferry boat program funding that's available for eligible projects, and this funding needs to be obligated by the end of fiscal year 25. Which is, of course, September 30th. So we at the TR are evaluating projects.
Yeah, we're going to do Eva's office.
Could somebody mute themselves, please?
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sandy.
Candidates. In the past, we have used these funds for catamaran overhaul, but we're not sure if that's going to be the correct one going forward. In order to obligate the funds by that deadlines, we do need to flex the funds in time that the project would, that it doesn't put the risk of not being obligated. So that's why we have urgency to include this information on the tip amendment, even though we do apologize for bringing the information and walking in at this late moment.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah. Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of my questions, I think Eric got to, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that. So the three projects that are kind of being removed, is my understanding correct that the reason those aren't being delayed, or they're noted as removal rather than a delay, is because there wasn't time to incorporate them into the draft tip that we're voting on today? And I guess then to follow up with that, is this something we would be looking to incorporate into the final tip document that we vote on in a month or so's time? And then I do have a second question after that.
So, John, can you answer? You want me to answer? I think I know the answer, but I'm not.
If you could
100%
answer, David, I didn't catch all of what Jen said, so.
So here's what I think. Here's what I think the answer is we manage the bridge program at a statewide level, and project costs have gone up and readiness has changed, and all things being equal, those three projects are not currently prioritized in the state bridge program for the next 5 years. I think is true. We're not kicking them out because we haven't got our bridge program ready. Our bridge program is ready, and given the constraints, those three fell out of the 5-year program. But John, if I'm wrong, jump in.
No, I mean, generally that's true, David, but we could make decisions now to free up, because their priority slipped. So we were freeing that cash up in this statewide year, and we don't have a priority for those bridges at this time. And we're, because we manage on a rolling, a statewide basis for the entire year. And we'll present those when we have a better handle on when they can be delivered, and as our priorities, kind of reinforce when those need to go.
Did you have other questions?
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. So not a readiness issue, but more a prioritization issue is what it is.
Is there a specific one of those bridges, Jen? Is it the one in Boston that you might be questioning?
I mean, I was curious about all three, but I think the one in Boston, of course, I would love any information you might have on that.
Well, I mean, they're specifically on River Street in Hyde Park. We're coordinating with the MBTA on station improvements, and that bridge was closed, and then we worked with our District 6 regional, district office and our contractor to get some repairs made so it could be reopened. And so I want to say it's not a priority, it's still a priority, but we're assessing other design options there to minimize impacts to the T's station and then City of Boston property, and we're exploring a couple different options. So we took it out of 25 because we knew we weren't going to make it. We got the current bridge reopened, and then we're looking at those options and saying, okay, with right of way, which isn't finalized at this point, we'll be able to reprogram at that time.
Yeah, but all three of those bridges have readiness issues as well as priority
Yes.
prioritization. Like none of them would be ready to go this year anyway. Other questions? Jen?
Yes,
Jen,
I guess
yeah.
maybe just one follow-up, if I may. It's on the River Street Bridge project, would love to pull together just a meeting, because we do have a number of Boston projects that are and planning efforts that are going on in that area. So I'll reach out to follow up on that. The one project in Boston that does seem to have been delayed and not reincorporated is the I-93 over at BTA Columbia Road Red Line relief one as well. But I think there's less immediate planning concerns around that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bridge preservation project. We did, again, we generally have done some of the work on some of those structures. So the priority so the urgency of doing that has slipped a little, or is it, all right, it's not as urgent because we did some repair work. And now we're trying to look at, should we modify the scope and eliminate the bridges that we did the repair work on? So we're assessing that.
Thank you.
Sandy?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Another comment unrelated to my previous one. If we could go back to the slide for Amendment 11 project changes to the FFY 2025 Transit Program, MBTA Other Federal. I think we just wanted to point out that of these projects that Ethan said are unlikely to be obligated in FFY 2025. A couple of them actually have been obligated. Lono and Alewife are obligated and in progress, and Mega is partially obligated.
Yeah,
So apologies.
that's the next slide, guys.
Apologies to staff for not getting you accurate information on that, but just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page.
Next slide again, please. Right,
Yeah,
so Sandy, just tell us again the projects. I know them, but tell us again so other people can see the
Yeah,
slide.
absolutely. So the Lono grant and the Alewife project are both obligated and in progress. So that's the second and third from bottom, and then the Mega grant from North Station is partially obligated.
Right. So those shouldn't be removed from 25, right? They've been obligated. So I think the North Station draw, Sandy can get you the right number, because everything except the FY 20, it's a 2-year obligation. They got 25 money and 26 money. And obviously you can't obligate 26 money because 26 hasn't happened. So some portion of North Station draw will show up in the 26 tip, but these have been obligated, and the T is underway doing what they need to do to start these projects. Other questions? Seeing none. Oh wait, I'm sorry, Derek Schuss, you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to check, Sandy, what year were those projects obligated? This or last?
That is a question I do not know off the top of my head. I assume it's this year, but if there's anybody else from the T who would like to comment who might know better, please feel free to call them, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, this is Josh Klingenstein from the MBTA Capital Program Planning Department. They were obligated in fiscal year 25, so this year.
Okay, so maybe they don't need to be amended out then if they've been.
Right, that's what I just said. We're not amending out Lono, and we're not amending out Alewife, and we're going to amend out whatever portion of North Station draw is FY 26 Monday, but it has to show up in FY 26, because as soon as FY 26 rolls around, the T will immediately seek obligation of the remaining funding for North Station draw. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second to release this amendment with the addition that Sandy talked about earlier for the $1.1 million ferryboat discretionary that is going to lapse at the end of this year if not obligated? To release this for a 21-day public review. Sandy Johnston.
I will make that motion, Mr. Chair.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard. Once again, John Bouchard. I will return. John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Tarasi,
Tyler Tarasi, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannes Witlikowski,
Hannes Wilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez,
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Christy Orio,
Christy Orio, yes.
Rachel Benson,
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke,
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
John Bouchard. This motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the MassDOT CIP, Michelle Scott. Michelle? All right, let's skip over this and we'll wait. Michelle.
Sorry, I
is-
needed to be unmuted. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Michelle.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yeah, we did. Sorry.
All right. Is it okay for me to go ahead and share my presentation file?
I think that's okay.
All right. I will bring that up. All right, just a moment, please. Thank you.
We can see it.
Yep, I'm just gonna put it in slide view.
Yeah.
It's back to the beginning. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your attention this morning. My name is Michelle Scott. I'm the manager of capital planning for the Mass DOT, working out of the Office of Transportation Planning. I'd like to cover 5 items related to our CIP this morning. The first is just an overview of what our CIP is. Second is talking a little bit how we put it together. Third relates to the relationship between our CIP and the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is inclusive of the Boston Region MPO's Transportation Improvement Program. I'd like to highlight some spending highlights from our upcoming program based on the data we have today, and then close out with some key upcoming dates about CIP development and requests for public feedback. Starting off with that overview, MassDOT CIP is our rolling 5-year plan that funds the planning, construction, and capital maintenance of the transportation system. And so this is inclusive of a wide variety of modal areas ranging from roads and bridges, bicycle pedestrian facilities, state-funded transit items for the MBTA and the regional transit authorities, our state-owned rail network, which supports both freight and passenger travel, public use airports, MassDOT's enterprise services, and capital assets for the Registry of Motor Vehicles. This is a fiscally constrained plan, and it reflects planned spending and cash flows for projects in the construction and implementation stages. And I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to the STIP component of the presentation, but this is one of the features that distinguishes the CIP from the STIP. The diagram on the right highlights how we put the CIP together. It's, informed at a high level by major, of course, federal policies, Keely Driscoll administration policies for the Commonwealth, and key MassDOT plans and priorities. These inform the development of investment programs, which serve as kind of containers for individual projects that are share a common theme or common modal attributes. All of these geared towards supporting improved transportation outcomes for the Commonwealth. This slide highlights the various funding sources that support our CIP. They include federal funding from the various USDOT modal administrations, both formula and discretionary. We have a variety of state funding sources, including general obligation bond proceeds, which we refer to as state bond cap, as well as special obligation bonds for a variety of particular special projects. Two highlights for this year include funding from the fair share surtax revenues that's now being used for bonding, as well as support from the Commonwealth's federal matching and debt reduction fund. MassDOT also supports capital investment through toll revenues that are available for capital, as well as a variety of other local, third-party, and other sources. This slide here highlights the overlap and relationships between the CIP and the STIP in terms of the information that they contain. So the diagram that's on the left side of the screen shows elements that are common to both the CIP and the STIP in green. These include the federal aid highway program, including both projects that are selected by metropolitan organizations and transportation planning organizations, as well as those selected by MassDOT. This is inclusive of both federal funds and matching funds. MassDOT also provides matching funds for RTA projects and also receives some federal transit funds directly that it uses for programming. So the other items in blue reflect the other components with the CIP. Their size of their boxes roughly reflects their scale within the overall CIP program, including things like the Chapter 90 local aid program, other state-funded highway items, state-funded items for the MBTA and other modal divisions, etc. The diagram on the right shows some items that do appear in the STIP, but that do not appear in the CIP. These include the MBTA's federal aid program, which is captured in the MBTA's CIP, as well as RTA federal funds and federal funds that for discretionary grants going direct to local entities. Moving on to talk a little bit more about some key common factors and distinguishing features between the CIP and the STIP. Really in the shared CIP features, which is in that orange box on the left, are really emphasizing kind of the core decision-making processes and the interrelated decision-making processes that inform both documents. So generally, both the STIP and CIP reflect the same kind of core program organization. Both are fiscally constrained to relevant funding sources for capital needs, and they're informed by the common processes of asset management data for prioritization, project scoring, and project readiness factors. Some key distinctions to note for the CIP, as I alluded to earlier. This is organized on a cash flow basis, so you'll see for a particular project, spending typically occurs over multiple years and may lag behind a little bit what's shown in the STIP, depending on when a project is obligated versus when it actually starts spending, which is usually sometime 6 months or so later. Another feature, CIP is organized on a state fiscal year basis, and it is approved by the MassDOT Board of Directors, whereas the STIP receives final approval from FHWA, FTA, EPA, and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. This timeline highlights the high level when we put the CIP together. It's roughly a 9-month or so process that we conduct on an annual basis. These bars for the various steps in CIP development are long, reflecting the very iterative nature of the CIP development process, which includes bringing in information from MPOs and TPOs, from transit agencies, et cetera, to bundle in information as it becomes available. We're moving into the final stages of the plan development, as shown in that right-hand portion of the screen, And I'll talk a little bit later on in the presentation about our anticipated release of a draft CIP for public review and our upcoming public comment period. This alternate timeline kind of shows the relationship between how we compile the CIP in parallel with information becoming available from MPOs and transit agencies for development of the TIPS and ultimately the STIP. So the orange boxes that kind of run through the middle there highlight MassDOT's role in providing information for this process, both through fund source information and project readiness, and sharing information about MassDOT statewide priorities, whereas the boxes in the April, June, and July timeframe show the integration of project information into the CIP, the parallel public comment processes which help inform each other, and the final stages of approval of both documents. Now to talk a little bit more about CIP development for the fiscal years 26 through 30 period in particular, I'd like to highlight some key factors that are shaping the development of our CIP for this year. We've organized them into two categories, internal and external. On the external side, of course, we have developments in terms of policies and funding availability at the federal level. Also, circumstances influencing the availability of Commonwealth level funds for things like state matches and NFA investments. And we continue to monitor through activities such as tracking for a long-range plan, et cetera, evolving travel needs, conditions, and circumstances on our transportation system that our capital investments need to meet or address. These evolving needs and changes can also impact the availability of some of our revenue sources, such as toll revenues. As I've alluded to in detail, partner agency decisions are, of course, a major impact for us, as well as feedback on the CIP process and project readiness and implementation. On the internal side, of course, we're guided by policies and emphasis areas for transportation that are coming from the Healy-Driscoll administration. Many of these are integrated into major guiding policies and priority areas for MassDOT, including the Beyond Mobility statewide long-range plan, MassDOT's forthcoming strategic business plan, and developments and recommendations that have emerged from the Transportation Funding Task Force, for which the Healy-Driscoll administration is now advancing several funding proposals designed to expand funding resources available for transportation. Finally, we're also guided by MassDOT's asset management plans and processes, project selection approaches, and ongoing work that we do to improve the CIP from year to year. I want to talk a little bit more about Beyond Mobility in particular, in terms of how it's shaping the CIP for this year. As many of you know, this is our statewide long-range transportation plan that was approved last year. It serves as a blueprint for transportation decision-making, inclusive of capital investment. The major priority areas and themes of this plan are shown in that blue text box on the right. So one of the things that we're really undertaking for this CIP development cycle is integrating Beyond Mobility priorities, recommendations, and action steps into our capital planning process. This is, of course, coming up in how we describe how we approach capital planning, and making sure that our public materials about the CIP are really reinforcing those connections to Beyond Mobility, but also starting to look at our programs and investments and seeing how we can effectively integrate the recommendations that the Beyond Mobility plan is bringing forward. So now to talk a little bit about some spending highlights. Again, these are as of early April, and we'll continue to iterate on this information as we move to our anticipated draft release in late May. But want to give you some general contours of how our plan is shaping up, as shown as on the table on the left. We're anticipating an approximately $8.4 billion capital plan for MassDOT, and the table here shows the various spending at the division level. The chart on the right highlights our top 10 MassDOT CIP programs within the CIP thus far. Far and away, and is typical for CIPs, the largest is our bridge program, with other investments in our roadway reconstruction program, major investments happening for the Cape Cod bridges, as well as for the Ulster Multimodal project, ongoing investments in Chapter 90, et cetera. I want to frame some of these spending highlights in a little more detail in that beyond mobility context. So this slide covers the first of the three major priority areas for beyond mobility: safety, travel experience, and reliability. These priority areas advance state of good repair, reliable travel times on our system, improved comfort and navigability, and paramount among these is reducing safety risks, fatalities, and serious injuries. And so, noted here, as although safety is integrated through a wide variety of our CIP programs, some highlights here include investments in our intersection improvements program, systematic safety improvements through other safety programs, and a new CIP program focused on vulnerable road user safety. The travel experience category emphasizes major roadway reconstruction and improvement projects. I'll give some highlights in that area shortly. Investment for pavement and capital asset needs in our public use airports, and ongoing support to the RTAs for vehicle and facility repairs and upgrades. Again, our reliability investments are making sure that our infrastructure can support consistent and reliable travel times for various modes. Again, that major emphasis in the bridge program to support that, close to $1 billion for interstate paving as well. And then asset investments in our state-owned rail network to ensure reliable freight and passenger travel. In terms of our remaining beyond mobility priority areas, these include resiliency, supporting clean transportation, and destination connectivity. These are really focused on advancing low emission or carbon-free transportation modes, preparing for and responding to climate change, and making sure that people can really effectively connect to the places that they need and want to go. Again, MassDOT's project development processes account for resiliency needs and factors in a wide variety of program areas. These are just some highlights, including through the resiliency program for culvert, dam, and flood control improvements, investments in aeronautics through unmanned aerial systems that'll help support resiliency and disaster recovery activities. Moving over to are supporting clean transportation, ongoing investments in deployment of charging along major roadways, as well as support for RTAs to electrify their systems. From the destination connectivity standpoint, continuing investment in bicycle and pedestrian travel, the Compass Rail Initiative, which is inclusive of West East Rail, and support for RTAs, local transit providers, councils on aging, and transportation management associations through a variety of programs as well. Our CIP continues support for municipalities in a variety of program areas, the largest of which is Chapter 90. I want to note that our current CIP reflects Chapter 90 investment consistent with prior years, a $200 million a year investment over 5 years. However, we do want to acknowledge that there is pending legislation with the State House proposed by the Healy-Driscoll administration that would increase Chapter 90 funding to $300 million per year and fund it with fair share surtax revenues. So do want to acknowledge that should those pieces of legislation be enacted, we will adjust CIP program accordingly. In addition to the Chapter 90 program, we do have a variety of other programs ranging from familiar programs like Complete Streets and the Municipal Pavement and Small Bridge program to ongoing investments through Safe Routes to School and Shared Streets and Spaces program, dedicating over $1.4 billion in the capital plan to local aid for municipalities. I'm going to talk a little bit about some project highlights at this stage. This slide captures some major Commonwealth-wide investments, including, of course, the Cape Cod bridges and the Ulster Multimodal project, as well as a variety of bridge and interchange investments happening throughout Massachusetts. Want to highlight a number of projects more on the Boston region level, and many of these are coming from the statewide highway list that's included in the Chapter 3 of your draft tip document today. These include investments for bridge replacements in Beverly and Salem for Kernwood Avenue and the Hall-Whitaker Drawbridge, investments in targeted safety improvements such as in the Chelsea area, ongoing investment to continue the longstanding work for the Hopkinton Westboro I-90, I-495 interchange improvements. And of course, future support for the McGrath Highway construction within the 26 to 30 period. As I mentioned earlier, the MassDOT CIP includes Commonwealth-funded investment for the MBTA. The MBTA CIP will capture MBTA capital investment from all sources. So there's a little bit of overlap between their CIP and ours with respect to investments specifically coming from the Commonwealth. So this highlights some investments in that area, including ongoing support for red and orange line vehicle procurement of bi-level commuter rail coaches, and investments in the new station accessibility and resilience programs, and ongoing power and system reliability improvements taking place under the Rail Reliability Program. And finally, some additional highlights, some degree on the smaller scale range, but still, very important for local investment as well as achieving our Beyond Mobility goals. These include climate and resiliency highlights, active transportation highlights through shared use path developments and safe routes to school investments. And of course, in some of the areas, such as aeronautics that are not included in the draft STIPs, such as investments for Beverly Regional Airport. So just to close out with some details about information that's forthcoming for our CIP. Right now, we're still in the phase where we're working with our Commonwealth partners to develop the nature of our plan, particularly with the Executive Office of Administration and Finance. Of course, also continuing to integrate information coming from MPOs and transit agencies as your draft STIPs are being prepared for release. We anticipate releasing a draft CIP following a board vote to do so in May. So we're anticipating that our public comment period will run from May 22nd through June 11th. We really appreciate the Boston MPO staff support in helping to get the word out about the drafts availability, and we're working with them to set up one of 6 public meetings that'll take place around the state during that period. And all of this will support gathering public comment to inform our board as they're making the decision to approve a final CIP, which we anticipate will take place in June. And more information about this process will be available at the web link below, which I can also share in the chat following the presentation. I want to thank you very much for your attention and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions for Michelle? Seeing none. Oh, wait. Nayeli?
Less of a question than a comment, but I think the city would just like to note the importance of this project and its criticality for reconnecting Boston communities, speaking about the Alston project in particular. And it's also of unique importance to the region and represents an important opportunity to improve transit and transit connections while addressing the issues with that portion of the pike. And I just want to note that the opportunity remains and there's still a lot of necessary work ahead for all parties to ensure that the design and plans for future service reflect those city and regional goals.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Next item is a review of the MBTA TIP projects, I believe. So Michelle, you need to stop sharing.
I think I should be all set, but let me know if I'm not. All right.
You're all set. Thanks, Michelle. Joshua Klingenstein, whenever you're ready.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Boston Region MPO. I'm here today to present on our proposed FFY 26 through 30 transportation improvement program. Next slide, please. Before I jump into the content on the tip, I just briefly wanted to review a request that came into us during our presentation at the last MPO meeting on the MBTA FY 26 through 30 CIP. There was a request to provide a bit more info about some of the unfunded requests and sort of the breakdown of those requests by program. So I just wanted to share this slide, which shows that breakdown by program. As you can see on the slide, the Guideway and Signal Power program has by far the largest level of unfunded need at 5.3 billion, approximately 5.3 billion. And there's a few reasons for that. Partially, this is due to the fact that that program has a lot of large scale corridor modernization programs that were requested on both the commuter rail and on our rapid transit lines. And all of those corridor upgrades involve significant work on our track, signal, and power infrastructure. So as you can imagine, those add up pretty quickly. Additionally, focusing in on power, there are many large-scale power state-of-good repair and modernization programs, including upgrades to traction power substations, which are quite expensive and could not be fully accommodated. We are making a significant investment in power in the FY 26 through 30 CIP, especially compared to previous years, but this kind of illustrates the level of unfunded need within that particular asset class. Other programs showing a large level of unfunded need include the Maintenance and Administrative Facilities Program and the Vehicles Program. For vehicles, there are a number of unfunded needs with sort of some of the procurements that would be occurring later in the 5-year window. Just forward-looking procurements of additional battery electric buses, additional high-level coaches, et cetera. And then on the facility side, of course, we have major facility projects such as the Arbor Way bus maintenance facility that were unable to be funded. So this is just a sampling of some of the projects that we weren't able to accommodate, but I wanted to just provide a little bit more context about in response to the requests that we received at that meeting. Next slide. And so now I'll jump into the content on our FFY 2025 through 29 tip amendment and the 26 through 30 tip. Next slide, please. So this, we've already voted on this, but just to give a quick summary of what was in our FFY 25 through 29 tip amendment, this included $4.8 billion of future federal funding, excluding any potential RIF or TIFIA financing, which we also include in our tables just as an FYI. This includes $2.3 billion in federal formula funding, $1.9 billion in potential CIG core capacity funding for the Green Line, and other federal funding, which includes discretionary grants, transfers from other governmental organizations, and congressional earmarks. Just a quick note on the graph, the programs that we use for categorizing our federal formula investments are slightly different than the programs we use in our CIP. So just if those numbers aren't tying out one-to-one to what we showed in our CIP, that is why. In terms of the programs here, the revenue vehicles was the top spending formula funding program, followed by signals and systems, and then followed by stations and facilities. And that generally mirrors sort of the breakdown in our investment in those different asset classes in the CIP as well. Next slide. Then moving on to the FFY 26 through 30 tip. Our 26 through 30 tip program includes $4.3 billion of future federal funding, which includes $2.2 billion in federal formula funding, as well as the $1.9 billion in CIG core capacity and additional other funding. The reason for the projected decrease between the 25 through 29 tip amendment and our 26 through 30 tip is generally that we assume all FFY 25 funding we receive either through transfers or through discretionary grants will be obligated in that same year. So this 26 through 30 tip assumes that we will be obligating a substantial amount of the projects and grants that were shown on our FFY 25 to 29 tip amendment. And then additionally, the RIF loan financing that we have in place for PTC, for our PTC and ATC programs is also assumed in FFY 25 only, so that rolls off in the 26 through 30 tip. And the breakdown in terms of sort of the relative investment in assets is largely the same as what I showed on the previous slide. And again, mirrors largely what is in our capital investment plan. Next slide, please. Just to drill in on the formula funding a little bit, because this is the funding that we sort of program through our CIP processes and is considered sort of part of the pot of available funding that we have to allocate. We programmed approximately $418 million in new federal formula funding as part of our CIP process, and that is all reflected in the tip. A few of the major projects that we have allocate or are planning to use our federal formula funding for include the procurement of new passenger locomotives on the commuter rail system, which has $122 million in new federal formula funding set aside. $37 million in additional funding to help bring the red and orange line signals program to completion. That's one of the major initiatives that we are working on this calendar year. And additionally, $31 million in new funding for the overhaul of 44 of our 60-foot hybrid buses, which were delivered from 2016 to 2017 and are scheduled for their midlife overhaul. Next slide, please. This slide just provides a little bit more context on our federal discretionary grants that are in both the tip and reflected in our capital investment plan. Since the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, the MBTA has had 22 successful grant applications led by our extraordinary discretionary grants team. And we have won more than $830 million in new federal funding during that time. We are continuing to aggressively pursue discretionary grants at the federal level in order to help address our significant funding needs that I have illustrated. And I did want to note that not all of the grants listed on this slide will appear in our TIP documentation because a number of them have actually already been obligated, which is good. But some of the notable grants that we have won sort of in the time period since the BIL began include the $67.6 million in all stations accessibility program funding to help make the Green Line surface stations on the Green Line C and B branches accessible. $472 million in total federal funding for the North Station Route 1 bridge through the Mega Grant project. And this, as we brought up earlier, $156 million in total funding, including $40 million in federal funding in FFY 25 for the continued procurement of battery electric buses. Next slide, please. And so the ask before the MPO today, and no vote needed right now, but later on, when Ethan presents the FFY 26 to 30 tip for approval, is to release the transit element of the 26 to 30 tip for a 30-day public comment period. And then, of course, the MPO will be considering endorsement of that tip at a future meeting. With that, I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joshua. And Lynn Diggins already has his hand up. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, can we back up a slide, please? Hey, on the summary chart, I mean, I'm just kind of curious. I mean, why does the submitted applications not equal the sum of the awards received and the unsuccessful applications?
That I believe that it may be the 4 submitted / pending applications, but I can check back with our discretionary grants team and see what the reason is there. Maybe
Okay.
an error.
All right, and I don't want to put you on the spot, especially since you were so good to provide that chart to us. But do you care to make any comment, on especially on the guideways, and signals, and power, what the effect of that large unfunded, need, has on reliability?
I don't want to speak to any, specific impacts in particular. Of course, having that level of unfunded need does threaten system reliability if not addressed. But we are making significant investments, especially into our power. And obviously, we've made significant investments into track through the track improvement program over the past few years. So we are doing what we can to address the situation while acknowledging that there is still significant unfunded need that, if left unaddressed in the long term, would obviously threaten service reliability.
Yeah, thanks. And it's certainly not a critique. On what was selected. I know that we're doing the most we can with the money we have. It's just, it's just a way, I think, to make the case.
Of course,
for it at all possible to get more funds for that important element. It would be helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jay Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Josh. In the past few years, this board has committed a fair amount of funds to advancing like regional rail and short-term actions that'll support regional rail electrification in the future. Is there anything in the CIP? I didn't see anything other than new locomotives, presumably diesel. Is there anything in this that would sort of kind of move that needle forward a little bit towards regional rail electrification?
Certainly, yes. And some of this may not be federally funded, which is why it would not show up in our TIP, even if it's in our CIP. But just to note a few of the projects that we're doing, obviously we are engaged with Keolis in a partnership to deliver battery electric service on the Fairmount line by 2028. So that is probably one of the major initiatives we're working on regarding rail electrification. On other lines beyond Fairmount, we are also working on a number of early action items to advance toward rail electrification. One that comes to mind is $10 million to help construct design and construct a traction power substation near North Station that will be needed for any future electrified service on the Newburyport-Rockport commuter rail line. And I'm happy to provide a full accounting. I'm sure there's more projects that I'm just not remembering at the moment, but those are some of the projects included in our CIP that address that, and a subset of those projects is included in the TIP as well if we are planning to use federal funding for it.
Right, I appreciate that. And the power substation in particular is a huge investment that I think folks should recognize as critical to electrification. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, no problem.
Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Joshua. The City of Boston will be following up with a comment letter, but I did want to take the opportunity to first congratulate the T on a year that brought investments both in state of good repair as well as service expansion. So really great to see both of those happening. Particularly on the state of good repair side, we're thrilled with how the track improvement program, or the other TIP, went, and it's made subway service much more reliable and grown ridership, getting us closer back to pre-pandemic levels. And then on the service expansion side, we've heard overwhelmingly positive feedback on the rollout of phase 1 of bus network redesign. So very excited about those accomplishments. We, of course, acknowledge the constrained and uncertain fiscal environment that we're all in. And we, at the same time, we did want to note that the investments in the CIP and the TIP, BTA's TIP side, have tipped heavily towards rail and rapid transit infrastructure, and so we will kind of continue to advocate for more funding resources and attention to be spent on bus riders that make up nearly 40% of the MBTA's ridership, and yet are representing just 11% of CIP spending, which I think is actually a little down 1% from last year. In particular, we really encourage increased investments in bus stops, transit signal priority, and then particular project, the Arborway Garage. We appreciate its acknowledgement in the plan, but we really want to see that move forward, given how essential it is to meeting the MBTA's climate goals and also Boston's housing production goals. And then connected to climate goals, that we are happy to see the inclusion of flood protection for rapid transit tunnels and strongly support this investment in really critical infrastructure for the region. We would similarly like to see investment in flood protections for the T's at-risk rail yards like Cabot and Orient Heights. Their resilience is equally important to ensuring functionality and safety at a district scale. And so we remain eager and committed to partnering in whatever capacity may be helpful on those. And then kind of echo some of what Jay was saying, we are really starting to see some of those investments in regional rail modernization and also the upgrades that support frequent decarbonized battery electric service on the Fairmont line, and also those early investments in Newbury Rockport. We are concerned to see the continued investment in the diesel haul push-pull locomotives. Those all begin their and end their trips in Boston neighborhoods. And so over the next 5 years, we'd really like to see the T move more aggressively towards electrifying the regional rail system with overhead wires, electric rolling stock, and facilities. And then we'd like to comment on the budgeted investments in Woodette Circle. We are encouraged to see investment in a layover facility that can help address the needs of increased rail service. And yet it's our understanding that the current investment is only enough to support Fairmont service. And so we'd like to see more near-term progress on larger investments in Woodette, including a comprehensive campus planning process in coordination with the city. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't note the red-blue connector is not programmed for more comprehensive engineering work. That project remains a priority for Boston. It would finally connect all 4 subway lines, significantly expand access for our Blue Line riders, reduce pressure on other downtown transfer points, and provide some critical operational flexibility. So we, to conclude, really appreciate the constraints the T is working within to both maintain and modernize a legacy system, and we stand ready to partner, push, and support our T colleagues in the coming years to address all of these needs that are before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Joshua.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the release for public review of the TIP, but I have to leave, so Eric is going to take the chair, and Derek Schuster will be voting in my stead for MassDOT. So Eric, take it away.
Okay, thank you, David. Ethan, pass it to you.
Right, thank you. So this next presentation I have here today is the 2026 to 2030 Draft Transportation Improvement Program document, which we'll be requesting a public review of following this presentation. If we can go on to the next slide, just to provide an overview on what I'll be discussing here this morning and into this afternoon. This presentation is going to start off with a review of public engagement around the TIP, talking not just about the comments that staff have received thus far, the comment period that will be accompanying this request for a vote to release the draft TIP, but also noting some upcoming opportunities for further discussion around the draft TIP or other future process improvements that may take place at future MPO meetings or committee meetings. I'll also then get into today's objective, which is voting out the draft 2026 to 30 TIP, summarizing what is in the document, what will not appear until the final document, any unresolved challenges that were encountered during this year's TIP cycle that will likely continue into future TIP cycles, and of course, create an opportunity for discussion. So moving into public comment, Appendix C of the draft federal fiscal years, or on the next slide, of the draft 26 to 30 TIP details public comments that have been received during TIP development. Table C-1 in Appendix C currently lists the 77 comments that staff received from stakeholders about general TIP development. This is, I think, about twice as many as were received last year. 68 of the comments were about specific projects, and 25 of them were about formal comment letters. It's worth noting these 77 comments also do not include letters of support that were submitted by project proponents for consideration as part of TIP project scoring, specifically related to new projects that were added. These comments mostly relate to projects either in the current TIP or other initiatives or objectives if it mentions a specific project. If we go on to the next slide, a lot of these comments were united across multiple themes. And one of the primary themes was really around funding uncertainty as the impetus for the letters, namely regarding delay and funding risks on projects, prompting communities, including residents in the communities, but also municipal staff and elected officials, to advocate for projects that are regionally prioritized within the regional target program. There was also, of course, advocacy from communities seeking funding through the TIP for new projects, and other letters that staff received addressed projects outside of the regional target program with an eye towards MassDOT's statewide highway program and the MBTA programs, all of which are included in this draft TIP. Engagement activities that MPO staff conducted largely focused across information, education, and encouragement. At least that's how MPO staff are sort of framing it for purposes of this discussion. Comments from the general public generally highlighted safety and transit as priorities for improvement and investment based on these engagement activities. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to talk about what information means in this context, and that namely revolves around the focus on process improvements. So, as was conducted in its inaugural year with the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 TIP development, the TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee was a primary forum across 5 different meetings for deliberating upon and developing recommendations for TIP challenges and also objectives and milestones for developing this draft TIP. And the discussions that this committee undertook, which often fed into MPO meetings, were reinforced by new exercises for information gathering conducted by MPO staff. The 2026 to 30 TIP marks the inauguration of the quarterly readiness updates, the next of which will be on May 15th, the sub-regional readiness days, which took place in January to help inform TIP readiness days by incorporating additional municipal perspectives on their project development, and to attempt to do earlier challenge resolution to ensure projects could stay with currently programmed readiness year, expanding project information on project proponents, either to potentially facilitate project rescoring or to provide additional information and context to MPO members and committee members, such as interim project schedule and cost estimate updates, and the reintroduction of something my predecessor had done, which was establishing formal ongoing TIP office hours, which is an opportunity that spans throughout the year and is still available should anyone wish to utilize it. As far as engagement on the next slide, one of the items, or really encouragement, I'd say, was broadening the engagement strategy that MPO staff undertook over this past year for increasing awareness around the TIP. Encouragement really addresses activities that generate interest in the TIP, and this is addressed in 2 different ways. One could classify one side of this as increasing interest in the offerings that the TIP has as part of funding, which is usually conducted as part of development of the TIP project universe, using the Metropolitan Area Planning Council's sub-regional engagement forums to drive interest in project applications and gain additional updates on projects through that existing outreach that they conduct. Externally, for other stakeholders, MPO staff have also worked very closely, not only between our TIP team, which is myself and Adriana Jacobson, but also our communications and engagement team, Stella Jordan, Jia Huang, Megan O'Connor, and Sean Rourke, to conduct what they've really led as the community planning lab. There's also been other actions that staff have undertook and participated in for direct community engagement across the region, and also meeting with peer MPOs in the Commonwealth, and starting to meet even with some of our neighbors up over in Rhode Island and New Hampshire, and other regional transportation partners and advocacy organizations as well. I'll emphasize that this coming summer, as part of not only this draft TIP engagement during the comment period, but also following, staff will continue to participate in public engagement events in person across the region. So if we can go on to the next slide. What I will say here is that the 2026 to 30 TIP reflects continued improvement in and growth upon communication and coordination around projects. But many of the discussions that have taken place around these different frameworks have presented new opportunities to be pursued using MPO target funding, but usually raise more questions than they may answer, and often these questions have been more difficult. The 2026 to 30 tip development has not answered all or even most of the questions that came up in the 2025 to 29 tip development or that have persisted across multiple years. These are questions that are going to continue to guide discussions over the coming months, namely as we debrief on the tip process in future meetings and well into the development of the federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 tip. But in the near term, on the next slide, at the end of today's presentation, staff are going to be requesting a 30-day public review period for the draft 2026 to 30 tip. This is to help facilitate an interim review step at the May 15th MPO meeting for a quarterly readiness update that would present MPO members with any items that may change between this draft tip and what would be presented on the June 5th MPO meeting. So if there are changes to project costs, descriptions, scopes, readiness years, etc., those will be presented there during that quarterly readiness update, along with anything else that staff may learn that may require some changes to the next tip. It's also worth noting that that afternoon on May 15th, there will be a tip process engagement and readiness committee, either to expand upon discussion that took place that morning on May 15th, or to also incorporate additional discussion on the role and other improvements the tip committee could undertake, and debriefing more broadly on the tip process. On the June 5th MPO meeting, that will be where there's a request to endorse the federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 tip after reviewing public comments and after taking into account any changes that may be sought as far as programming scenarios. So if any projects cannot make their advertising year, or if there are any changes or reintroductions or additions of projects that would need to be made, they would likely appear there on that vote. So what is in the 26 to 30 tip in summary? On the next slide and afterwards, this next tip represents a fairly substantial growth across all of the programs that are included within it, from about $6.4 billion to $10.3 billion of federally funded transportation investments. Now, the reason for this is largely the result of the new addition or introduction of the MBTA's core capacity program funding, which has been discussed as part of previous tip amendments for the federal fiscal year 2025 to 29 tip. The Boston Region Target Pool, which is usually what is often discussed as part of scenario programming and development, represents about $754 million, or only 7% of all of the funding that is included in this tip. MassDOT's statewide highway program has about $1.808 billion. Other MBTA projects outside of the core capacity funding represent about $3.8 billion. And again, these are federal transportation investments, so they do not necessarily represent all MBTA projects that may be included in the CIP, as was noted previously. As far as Metro West and Regional Transit Authority and Cape Ann Transportation Authority projects, they amount to about $145 million. So the bulk of all funding in this tip is currently contained within the MBTA's programs. A much smaller amount is contained within the MPO Target program, about 18% for MassDOT programs. It is worth noting on the next slide, though, just looking at that 7% for Regional Target, this tip funds 58 projects, 19 of which are new projects. This is down from the federal fiscal year's 25-29 tip, which funded about 70 projects, due in large part to the Community Connections program and design pilot of the previous tip. Among those 19 new projects, 7 of those are Community Connections projects. There's 1 trail project and 1 complete streets project. There's also 3 new transit transformation projects, 5 design projects, and 2 administrative line items. Now, often when we develop the tip, and as is also reflected in the tip document on the next slide, we compare how the investment programs that projects are assigned to, and thus the investments are assigned to, towards the targets that are set as part of the development process for the Long Range Transportation Plan, or LRTP. This graph in blue indicates the LRTP goal area by investment program, and in orange, the actual investments being made through the draft 2630 tip for the regional target program, not the statewide highway program. What we're seeing here with this tip is that the complete streets program is about on target at around 45% with its LRTP goal. Major infrastructure is greater than its goal, about 31%, and intersection improvements is substantially lower than its goal of around 12.5%. Now, I will note the reason why major infrastructure is a little bit higher than its goal and intersection improvements is much lower is specifically the result of one project in Norwood that was, which is the Route 1 University Avenue project, which was reclassified from intersection improvements to major infrastructure, given it is included in the MPO's long-range plan, given the capacity additions and lane additions that are included in that project. So if it looks like intersection improvements are fairly low, as I like to mention every year, each of these investment programs have substantial overlap across one another, and the change for intersection improvements this year is the result of that reclassification of that project. The Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections program does continue to perform above its LRTP target of 5%. In this tip, it's at around 11%. Transit transformation, unlike in recent tips, is actually lower than its target at around 5%. And community connections is also slightly lower than its target. Bike share support is about where it is expected in the LRTP. Though it is also worth noting, as I like to mention every year, the LRTP goals will never actually be met dead on or to the percentage point, so to speak, as the LRTP does not allocate to program targets for administrative funding line items, in this case referring to the set aside for the design pilot, and a small carve out of funding for the procurement of air quality sensors, and namely the around 6% of funding that is unprogrammed. So when I say that targets are unlikely to be met, given how LRTP targets are set, because the LRTP does not include that unprogrammed fund amount as a target explicitly, that 6% will always sort of throw numbers off here and there. So it is worth noting on the next slide that the location of investments are also tracked by MPO staff and are also reflected in Appendix D of the TIP document. As part of this TIP with 58 projects, those 58 projects appear in 36 unique communities. Now, again, it is worth noting this is a decrease in projects overall from last year. This is also a decrease in the number of communities that are included in the TIP versus last year's TIP. But what we're seeing here on this slide is an allocation of funding, or the allocation of funding by MPO subregion for regional target projects across the 5 years of the TIP. Appendix D not only includes the regional target allocations for the 5 years of the TIP, it also includes all investments, including the statewide highway program across those 5 years, and both regional target and statewide highway investments between 2011 and 2030 as well. So there are 4 different graphs in Appendix D. I'm only going to show the one that exists for this TIP just for the regional target, but if you're interested in a longer term outlook on funding allocations to individual municipalities or across different subregions, that is also available in this document. What this graph generally shows is the percent of target funding in blue relative to population in orange, employment levels in green, and federal aid roadway miles in gray. And it is also worth noting here that usually we compare targets when we discuss them relative to the population, though there are other metrics tracked. In this TIP, the inner core subregion represents around 53% of the population, with 56% of the funding driven in large part by major infrastructure projects. The Minuteman Advisory Group has about 1.1% of funding to 5% of population. Metro West had about 5.5% of funding to 7% of population. Southwest Advisory Planning Group is at around 4.6% of funding to 5%, so fairly close. North Shore Task Force is at around 12% of funding to 9% of population. South Shore Coalition, 5% of funding to 7% of population. North Suburban Planning Council at 7.5% of funding to 6% of population. And Three Rivers Interlocal Council is a little bit higher than its population, about 8% of funding and 8% of population. So with all of that information in mind at a very high level summary, on the next slide, I'll get into what is not in the draft 26 to 30 TIP. So for one, the draft TIP does not currently include Appendix G, which is the operations and maintenance or O&M summary for regional transit authorities, the MBTA, and MassDOT. And of course, it's worth noting that project costs and timelines may continue to change between today and the endorsement of the final TIP well into October. Any of those changes that are not already incorporated in this TIP, which staff do not have any to share today, would be conveyed to MPO members as early as May 15th at that meeting. and any incorporated changes would be subject to MPO approval on June 5th as part of the endorsement. And that includes reconsideration of either removed projects or unfunded projects. Any program changes would result in revisions across the TIP document. So the document that is out would go out for comment, would differ from what is finalized. Just noting that, as any interim changes would likely result in version control issues, to be frank. So on the next slide, there's also some unresolved challenges, as I mentioned earlier. Discussions around TIP scenarios for the 2026 to 30 TIP did not fully address risks for projects that were programmed as early as federal fiscal year 2026. There are still substantial cost risks across all 5 years of the program, in addition to those readiness risks in fiscal 26 and other years. And there's a large number of projects still on the TIP that lack timely design submissions and revised cost estimates, and recent scores as well to inform decision-making that may take place in the future around those projects. And I will also note, with regard to some of these projects, staff do in some cases lack detailed descriptions of the scope of work for some of these line items. As well, TIP application volumes are also increasing in tandem. This is being reinforced by the programming strategy that was conducted this year around the 25% design requirement. There were a large number of applications this year. The majority of them are likely to return next year, and further being reinforced by the introduction of additional funding for design resources. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the 2630 TIP is funding fewer projects in fewer communities, but there are more resources being made available through the MPO, and also, as we learned during MassDOT's CIP presentation, other teams at MassDOT to help support the project development process for communities. These are all challenges between readiness risk, cost risk, delays, and increasing application volumes that will likely return in the development of the federal fiscal years 2027 to 31 TIP a year from now. So on that note, and on the next slide and the one after that, staff are requesting that the board votes to release the draft 2026 to 30 TIP for that 30-day public comment period, which would begin Monday, April 28th and end May 28th at 5 p.m. And I'm happy to take any questions on this item.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan? Actually, before I get to questions, Ethan, just to be crystal clear, your desire is that any changes, any motions be held until the June 5th meeting, because you'd like to get the document out today as it is and make any changes on June 5th.
Any motions that would require changes effective today?
Yeah.
That would alter the document? Yes, though any other things that would not immediately impact the document but could have a delayed impact that could be addressed later could be addressed. That makes sense. Might be a bit confusing the way I said that.
I know there was a lot of discussion in the public comment period about the Chelsea project, and that's the kind of project that you would be interested in having sort of that discussion, and if we take action on June 5th, correct?
Yes, that's a more succinct and clear way of saying it.
Okay, great. So on that, any questions, Tom Bent?
I think you just cleared it up. Just given that Chelsea came in today with more information on their project and that they're at 25% submitted, and the project actually came down. It looks like, from my math's right, it was in there at 11,287,647, and now it's at 9,968,832. So it's about $1.3 million less than what we had earlier. But you would, so my intention was to make a motion today, but if it makes more sense in hearing what Ethan just had to say, and waiting till June 5th, I can do that. But I just wanted to let Ethan and the board know my intention would be to add this to the 2030 timeline.
Great, thank you, Tom. Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to understand what's going to happen on the 15th. So we have a meeting that day to review comments, and then we have a tipper meeting. And the point of that tipper meeting is to review, kind of review what happened in that morning's meeting. And will our deliberations mean at that meeting potentially have any impact on the tip? Because we won't be coming back to the full committee after that meeting before another MPO meeting, right?
Yes, so part of the idea is that naturally there are other items on the agenda for the May 15th MPO meeting outside of the quarterly readiness update for the TIP. The TIP committee meeting that afternoon is meant to not only provide more detail on what may have come up that morning,
Right.
which is more opportunity to discuss further, but to also debrief TIP development, which will not happen that morning, based on what the anticipation is. That morning is more about specific project changes, line item changes to the document, and discussing public comment staff had received thus far. The actual debrief on the TIP process would take place in the afternoon. Any specific questions, like for example, if a project cost suddenly goes up and does need to be addressed as part of it, that would be mentioned in the morning. There may be an opportunity to discuss it further in the afternoon.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand that. Is there anything that we discuss in the afternoon that would then have any impact on what we then discuss at the next MPO regarding MPO board, full board meeting regarding the TIP?
That is not the current intention of this TIP committee meeting. It's more of a general debrief and talking about the role of the committee and how things went this year.
Gotcha. So if the tipper, I'm trying to understand if there's a way that we could have some impact on what we approve. So let's say we get comments in and they are meaningful, in that we do potentially want to change things. Like for instance, what Tom has suggested. Would it be, we would have to have a tipper meeting before then, for the tipper to then think about these things and then potentially make a recommendation to the full board, right?
As far as I can't necessarily say how the discussion will go on May 15th, but that is fair ground, I would say, but decisions would not be made on any scenarios until June 5th.
Yeah, and Len, I think that, staff at that tipper meeting, they can bring whatever they've heard to date into that meeting, and we can, discuss. And then, we will have a full MPO meeting, dedicated, to this. And typically we don't make major, changes. It would be, some relatively modest things. We've already heard from Tom. He's, definitely interested in bringing up the motion for the Chelsea Park and Pearl project. So, I think we can handle it with the timing of this.
Okay, I understand. All right, thank you.
Jay.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I just wanted to echo Tom's support for the Chelsea project. I think we're kind of setting a good example here. Chelsea came in, brought their project to 25%, submitted it. I know there were other projects on the TIP that were proposed to be added that we chose not to, on account of the fact they were not yet at 25%, but encouraging them to move forward. So I think this process here, this we've got some time, we've got some, the summer, it seems like, to allow folks to demonstrate to us that they're on track, they're getting their 25% designs in, that this is a fluid situation, I think is a good thing. So that's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. David Kozis.
Oh, yes, thank you, Chair. So Newton would also just like to voice our support for putting the Park and Pearl project back in 2030 as soon as we can. And, since we can't make that change today, we certainly support seeing it, at the June 5th meeting or whenever we can after that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Jen Rowe.
Thank you. Yeah, I would also add my Boston's voice to the adding Chelsea back in to 2030. And maybe I'm putting hairs here, but I'm curious if it would be helpful to staff first to like motion that it be added in advance, to what we see on the 5th. But I'll leave it to staff to say if it's a helpful thing or if this is enough of a conversation to do that. That's all I had.
I believe that is, yeah, I think that would be accommodated. We can make sure that our public materials or responses to any inquiries we receive about the project also reflect that motion that was made.
Reflect the comment, the discussion today.
Yes.
Great. John Romano, you had your hand raised.
No, I'm all set. I'm good now.
You're good? Okay.
I heard enough.
Derek.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say on MassDOT's behalf that we also support the inclusion of the Chelsea project into the 2030 element of the Boston Regional Tip Target Program based on the feedback and updates we heard from board members, of course, and from City of Chelsea. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments on the federal fiscal year 26 to 30 tip? I'm not seeing any, so I think we want to get a motion to put it out for public comment, I believe. Is that correct, Ethan?
Yes, please.
Great. Then can I have a motion? Len Diggins.
I'd like to make a motion to put the draft tip out for public comment.
Great. Aaron Shute.
Second that.
Great. So we have a motion and a second to put the tip out for public comment. And can we call the roll?
Certainly. MassDOT seat 1.
Yes.
Thank you. John Bouchard.
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Tyler Terasi.
And it's Tyler Terasi, yes.
Thank you. Sarah Lee.
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Hannah Switlikowski.
Anna Swilikowski, yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
Nayeli Rodriguez.
Nayeli Rodriguez, yes.
Jay Monty.
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
Aaron Shute.
Shoot, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bent, yes.
Kristen Guichard.
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti.
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Rachel Benson.
Rachel Benson, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
This motion passes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. Okay. So I believe the next thing on the agenda is the Vision Zero update. Allie Kleeman.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, do we have the slides? Thanks. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Allie Kleeman. I'm the project manager for the Regional Safety Action Plan or Vision Zero Action Plan. Next slide. So I'm going to cover two main things today: the Safety Action Plan timeline and our findings so far in the data analysis, the high injury network, and the stakeholder engagement. It's a lot of information to try to cover, and I'm going to try to highlight just 1 to 2 key takeaways as we go through the slides. And then in terms of how this connects to what comes next, we'll share a link to the safety data analysis memo in the chat and a link to a Google form for your feedback. I'm also happy to talk at any point, and I welcome any thoughts, questions, ideas for other things we could be doing, or other ways we could look at the data. In terms of, I'll be back in front of this board also at the May 15th and June 26th meetings to continue talking about the development of the safety action plan. And we're working on organizing a separate workshop for board members that would cover more in-depth information about safe systems and goal setting in the context of Vision Zero. Next slide. So this slide is just to ground us in where we are, give an overview of what we were working on in 2024, what's been going on in 2025 so far, and what's coming up throughout the rest of this year. On the bottom of the slide, you can see where MPO board meetings and Vision Zero task force meetings fit in. So in 2024, we were focused on data analysis, developing the high injury and high risk networks, and initial engagement. We had several task force meetings. In the first half of 2025, we've been focused on getting a draft safety action plan completed by the end of June. Major activities include data analysis, development of recommended policies, strategies, and projects, and continued stakeholder engagement. We'll be meeting with both the task force and this board a few more times in the coming months with the goal of having the MPO approve a public draft safety action plan for public review in late June. And then in July, we'll do engagement for the draft action plan, another MPO meeting for you to endorse that plan, and then turn our focus to implementation, demonstration projects, and progress reporting. Next slide. So before we get into the data, I just wanted to remind us briefly why we're talking about this. As part of the last long-range plan and as part of applying for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that is funding this work, this board committed to a goal of 0 deaths and serious injuries on our streets. So this slide shows the comparison you've seen before between the traditional approach to roadway safety and the Vision Zero approach. One of the differences that always sticks out to me is our traditional expectation of perfect human behavior on our streets, contrasted with Vision Zero's focus on recognizing that roadway users don't act perfectly and integrating human mistakes into our safety work. And this is throughout the transportation system. So not only designing streets to make it difficult to drive at high speeds, but passing policies that better address things like seatbelt usage and integrating technologies in vehicles that stop people from driving while intoxicated. So that sets the stage for the action plan and why we're doing this work. Next slide. And the next several slides give an overview of the existing conditions data analysis so far. So this is where that link in the chat is to the memo that has the complete data analysis. Next slide. So first, it's useful to look at the long-term trends. If we look at the past 40 years or so, we see that since 1980, fatalities have decreased 68% from over 300 a year to current levels of over 100 a year. Fatalities decreased sharply from 1980 to 2000 before decreasing at a slower pace over the past 20 years or so. A lot of the initial significant decline is likely due to advances in transportation safety technology, such as the rising use of seatbelts and the broader inclusion of airbags in vehicles. Next slide. But despite a long-term decrease, recent years actually show an alarming increase in both fatal and serious injury crashes in the region. Next slide. So that's a high-level overview of the crash data. The next several slides go into some of the key data analysis areas that we've looked into. So I think this has come up at board meetings before, but wanting to understand the economic impact of crashes in the region. So this table looks at the cost of crashes by crash severity, and you can see that every fatal crash costs the region over $19 million. And all fatal and serious injury crashes combined in the 2018 to 2022 time period have cost about $12 billion. Next slide. We also looked at the type of vehicles involved in crashes. So while passenger vehicles are involved in the greatest number of fatal and serious injury crashes, passenger vehicles also have the highest VMT in the region, about 96%. So if we look at crash rate, we can see that trucks and motorcycles have a higher rate of fatal and serious injury crashes based on their VMT in the region. Next slide. And then one way to look at where crashes are taking place is to look at data about roadway jurisdiction and how it aligns with crashes. So this slide shows that about 3/4 of fatal and serious injury crashes occurred on roads owned by municipalities. This makes sense since the vast majority of roadway miles are owned by municipalities. Another thing this data tells us is that fatal and serious injury crashes are happening at a disproportionate amount on state-owned roads compared to the mileage of these roads in the region. Next slide. So we've also tried to see if we could bring land use data into the analysis and understand how different land uses relate to fatal and serious injury crashes. So initial analysis of this data shows that commercial areas have higher amounts of fatal and serious injury crashes involving vulnerable road users. And both commercial and residential land uses have a high involvement of light trucks in fatal and serious injury crashes. Next slide. So shifting gears a bit, in addition to analyzing the detailed crash data for things like vehicle type and location, we can use it to focus in on crashes by Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP emphasis area. Based on data analysis, we're planning on focusing in on a subset of the MassDOT HSIP emphasis areas. We chose these 6 areas based on 2 factors: whether the fatal and serious injury crashes in the emphasis area were higher in the region compared to the Commonwealth, or whether the percent change in fatal and serious injury crashes from 2018 to 2022 was higher in the region compared to the Commonwealth. So focusing in on these emphasis areas helps us align with MassDOT's HSIP criteria and the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, and will be useful as we start to think about selecting and prioritizing the strategies and interventions in the plan. Next slide. So 2 other parts of the data analysis are understanding the data at a sub-regional level and understanding it at a municipal level. So the next couple of slides go through some of the initial findings for those 2 geographies. So when looking at the sub-regional level, one thing that stands out is the rate of change from 2018 through 2022. So this map shows the percentage change in fatal and serious injury crashes. You can see that TRIC and North Shore Task Force showed decreases. Intercore, Magic, and Metro West remained relatively constant. And North Suburban Planning Council, South Shore Coalition, and SWAP all increased at varying rates. Next slide. When looking at the municipal level, we see some things like out of the top 10 municipalities by fatal and serious injury crashes, those with the highest number of those crashes have actually seen decreasing numbers in recent years, while those municipalities with lower numbers have been increasing. And then we also tend to see that municipalities with the highest fatal and serious injury crash rates are more suburban style municipalities on the outer edges of the region. Next slide. So the next 2 slides show the top 10 municipalities. This is based on the number of crashes in this slide. And if you go to the next slide, this is the top 10 based on the rate per 100,000 residents. So one thing to note is that Lynn and Chelsea show up in both lists. So that's the summary of the existing conditions data analysis. Hopefully you get a sense of how it starts to inform next steps for the action plan. And you can go to the next slide. So shifting gears again, I want to talk briefly about the high injury and high risk networks. You can go to the next slide. So a common Vision Zero approach is to use the crash and risk data to develop a high injury network in order to focus limited time and resources in the most problematic locations to improve safety. So we've developed these networks at 3 levels: the regional, sub-regional, and municipal. And we've identified the top 5% of roadways where the most serious and fatal injury crashes occur at each of those levels. Next slide. And when we analyze the high injury network, it can help us understand more about where the problems are. We can see that a majority of the fatal and serious injury crashes in the region, 58%, occur on just 7% of roadway miles. We can again understand the jurisdiction of the roadways where more serious crashes are happening. And finally, we can see that the vast majority of the high injury roads are arterials, so our higher speed, multi-lane roads are where more problems are. Next slide. So the other aspects of what we've been working on is engagement, both with the public, municipal staff and leadership, and state partners. So I just have a few slides to summarize that work. Next slide. This slide summarizes what we've done, what we've heard, and what we're doing next. So like I said, we've done engagement with municipal staff, state partners, and the public. We've gotten a lot of feedback from municipal staff about the challenges they face trying to improve transportation safety and the guidance they'd like from the MPO. We've gotten insight and guidance from our partners at MassDOT, and we've heard from the public through our survey and other public meetings. The main things we're focused on next for stakeholder engagement are at the municipal level, 2 municipal roundtables to continue engaging with planners and DPW staff, as well as local law enforcement, and another municipal office hours to talk with municipal staff about recommended actions and interventions in the plan. On the state side, we're prioritizing engagement with DCR, the RMV, and the Department of Public Health to learn from them about their work related to roadway safety. And we have more public engagement planned through focus groups to reach people with disabilities, older adults, and the business community. Next slide. I wanted to go into a little more detail on the 2 surveys we've done. So this is the municipal staff survey. We heard from about 1/3 of municipalities in the region, and the main concerns we heard related to infrastructure were poor and missing sidewalks and bike lanes, and related to driver behavior were speeding and distracted driving. Next slide. On the public survey, we heard from people in 58 municipalities. We received a total of 761 responses and over 1,600 written comments. And we got comments about the roadway safety issues in 91 of our 97 municipalities. And we got a range of feedback on the types of infrastructure and driver behaviors that make people feel safer or less safe. Next slide. All right, so that was a lot of information. Thank you for sticking with me. Next slide. Just to bring us back to the project timeline, there's a lot of work to be done in the next few months. We're going to take all the data analysis and engagement input and start to develop prioritized actions and interventions for the plan. And we'll be talking about this at 2 more MPO meetings, with the goal of having the action plan voted out for public review at the end of June. Next slide. And again, please review the existing conditions memo. The link is in the chat, as well as the Google form with some questions if you want to provide feedback that way. I'm always happy to jump on the phone or shoot me an email. We want your ideas and priorities to be reflected in this plan. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Allie. Any questions? Jen Rowe.
Thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate all this information and the thought that's gone into also like providing us with the form at the same time. So I know this is happening on a somewhat compressed time scale for reasons outside of y'all's control. But really appreciate how much this you're doing to allow us to provide input. One question I had, at one of the prior office hours you organized, there was also the we were able to like kind of see the draft high injury maps, and I know that you were going to be incorporating some kind of additional changes and to those with additional data and kind of just quality control sort of things. I didn't know if that was those links, if we can still kind of take a look at those. Is that something we're looking to provide feedback on in addition to the memo at this point, or is that maybe later on?
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of going through a transition with that. We did an initial round of engagement and getting feedback. And we've got all the layers now, and we need to sort of recreate a revised map and get it up online. So I can update everyone with the timeline on that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Let's see, Logan Casey.
Thank you very much, Logan Casey, Town of Marblehead. Thank you, Allie, for the great presentation today. It was wonderful to be involved in the engagement process as you kind of been developing this. And I'm really excited to see kind of the final draft recommendations come out in, I think, July, as you just said. Kind of in relation to the final draft of this document and related to the FS4A implementation grants we could apply for. I did see that the FFY 25 application for SS4A implementation grants currently out, and for municipalities like Marblehead that haven't adopted an individual action plan yet, we'd be relying on the MPO's action plan to qualify for that implementation grant. Do you have any information on whether it sounds like the answer is probably not this round, but would the action plan and kind of its draft format be eligible for municipalities to apply for implementation grants in this round, or should we kind of wait for the MPO to approve and finalize these draft plans?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, probably as you know, it's definitely qualifies you for the planning and demonstration grants, which I think we've heard, and I think people on this board as well have had experience with those being, a good avenue if it fits with what you're trying to do in terms of maybe being easier to get those grants. The question of implementation, we had a conversation with MassDOT about that recently. So I think it is something we're looking into just in terms of the timeline for this and what's required for an implementation grant. So we can follow up with you on that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the Vision Zero project? Okay, not seeing any. Allie, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
And that takes us to our last agenda item, which is members' items. Are there any items that members want to bring up today? I know it's been a long day and I'm not seeing any, so I think we will move to adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Tom Bent.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Jen Rowe.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, then without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for a great meeting, and look forward to seeing folks in a few weeks. Take care.